This is Tao Unbound, the English language podcast of Tel Aviv University. Please welcome your host, Ido Aharoni, Tel Aviv University's graduate, member of the Board of Governors, lecturer, writer, and veteran diplomat.
Welcome to another episode of Tao Unbound. I'm Ido Aharoni, your host, and it is my great privilege and pleasure to host today Galia Feit. Welcome.
Thank you, Ido. It's a pleasure to be here.
Galia, to our viewers and listeners, is a social cause lawyer and also the executive director of the Institute on Law and Philanthropy at the Buchman Faculty of Law at Tel Aviv University. She got her first and second law degrees from Tel Aviv U, and now she is working here full-time. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
The main reason why we invited you is because you actually discovered something, or you were part of a team that discovered something very, very counterintuitive to all of us who know Israelis, and that is that Israelis are actually very philanthropic, especially in times of crisis, because the perception, especially overseas, is that Israelis are not so philanthropic. So tell us, what was the study, what prompted the study, and what were the main findings?
So I want to talk today about the solidarity and the pro-social behavior that we are seeing among Israelis and among institutional donors and foundations in Israel towards the needs, the vast needs of the Israelis, the evacuees, the injured, the victims, since the atrocities of October 7th and the war since then. The first thing that comes to mind is that everybody in Israel, and I think we know this without need of research, everybody in Israel, amidst the shock, right? There's this shock of October 7th, looked around and said, okay, what can I do? And people started cooking and mobilizing equipment and transporting evacuees from the Gaza envelope to the hotels and collecting household items and clothes, right, to donate to the evacuees. Everybody was hectic about supporting. That's the only thing that people felt that was right to do. And actually, we see that also in our research. So we study the trends and the patterns of giving throughout the days of war. We have a weekly representative sample, and we ask people about their donations and their volunteering. And we've seen unprecedented volunteering and donating. So if at normal times we see 47% of Israelis who contribute, right, to the nonprofit sector, during the first weeks of the war, it rose to 62%. Everybody that could do something did something. And the amounts that were donated were twice as high. So if in normal times we see people donating 230 shekels to a cause, right? It rose to 480 shekels to this cause. And the high numbers are keeping into the 8th week of the war, even if they're declining a little bit. That's still very much higher than normal days. They're higher than they were during the COVID crisis. So I think they attest, right, to the huge crisis that we are witnessing on the one side, and then to the solidarity that we're witnessing on the other side.
Now, would you say that exceptional level of solidarity is being manifested by the high participation in the communal act of philanthropy and the individual act of philanthropy, would you say it's part of the psychological response to the trauma of October 7th?
I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know to answer that. But I think the incentive that they drive them, is to be part of this collective. We are in collective shock, we're in collective trauma, and we're in collective need. And people show they're part of the collective by assisting others within the collective. So, we had, the greatest example is the Expo volunteering led by the Brothers and Sisters in Arms, right? So they already on the second day, on October 8th, had 1,000 volunteers, and the following days, 15,000 volunteers every day, right? Collecting, again, food, preparing food and collecting food and dispersing the food to
And helping the
front
farmers.
lines,
Yeah.
soldiers on the front lines
Yeah.
and the home front. But it's not only those spontaneous organizations. We need to remember that the nonprofit sector in Israel is a very established, experienced, with expertise. These are well-founded organizations. They were also among the first responders. So we had whatever, Ichud V'Atzala and Magen David Adom and Latet and Leket and Israel and Lev Echad, all mobilizing their volunteers and their people to evacuate people from the Gaza envelope, right, and to support them with food and
Now,
with
I wonder
clothes.
if your research showed anything about the sensitivity of people to, or the ability of people to make a distinction between legitimate philanthropic charitable causes and illegitimate. I can tell you that since October 7, I've been bombarded through the text messages system on my phone with all sorts of NGOs and charities I've never heard of. Question is, do you feel that people develop some sort of ability or at least sensitivity to distinguish legitimate from illegitimate charitable causes?
There's always fraud, right? But fraud is on the sidelines. So people mobilize their energy either through the WhatsApp groups and the payment apps, Beat and Paybox, and the crowdfunding platforms. We have data from the JGive platform that was analyzed by my colleague Usnat Khazan and her colleague from JGive Baktu, showing that the number of donations through that platform doubled in October compared to any average month, and
Do
the
you have
amounts.
any numbers to share with us?
56,000 donations during October. That's double the average in any regular month. And 46 million shekels. That's 4 times the average of a regular month. This is looking only at donations from Israelis, from within Israel. So I think there's always fraud, right? But there's the trust you give in your circles. And today we have in the past few years, we have the GuideStar website where you can check on nonprofits in Israel and see they're viable. You have, Natal in Iran and the Coalition for Trauma opened their hotlines early on Saturday morning. They were swarmed with phone calls from within the shelters in the Gaza envelope, people needing immediate support, mental and emotional support. And since then, they've been offering their support, to the evacuees, to the injured at the hospitals. They need the funding to actually pivot, right, all their work to support the whole of Israeli people, because all Israeli people are traumatized, and we need to make sure that it doesn't develop into post-trauma,
Right,
right?
absolutely. And we will talk about that too. Any interaction that you see between philanthropic efforts from overseas and local Israeli philanthropies? Do you see any
Yeah.
convergence, any
Yeah. Thank
cooperation?
you. Thank you for mentioning and asking that. I mean, institutional philanthropy, strategic donors and foundations, both from Israel and abroad, have been supporting the nonprofit sector for decades now, especially from the United States, but not only from Europe and other countries. And they had the same sense of urgency, right, since October 7th, to donate to the organizations that they already support. And the organizations that they already support all pivoted to support with emotional, physical assistance to the needy, to address all the needs. And then after a couple of weeks, they poured tens of millions of shekels and dollars. The Jewish funders, the JFNA, the umbrella organization for the federations in the United States, North America, collected over $750 million, right? And then they dispersed probably around a third of that, holding the rest, because institutional philanthropy and strategic donors don't look only at the emergency in the moment, but they look into the future. They see the midterm and the long-term needs, and they have to strategize about it. So the collaborations between Israeli donors and overseas donors led to the assembly of weekly meetings from held by the Jewish Funders Network and the Forum of Foundations and the Institute for Law and Philanthropy, in which we shared briefs on the situation, of the evacuees, of the families of the abducted and hostages, of the needs of immediate education system within the evacuation spaces, of the growing tensions between Arabs and Jews in Israel, of the need for mental and emotional support in the short term and the long term to inform, right? This is all to inform both on the changing and developing needs in the immediate times and for the midterm and long term for philanthropists, for people that are already invested in philanthropy in Israel to prepare for the next stages.
And obviously, a big part is, and again, I know that you're not trained to deal with the psychological dimension of it, but you don't need to be a psychologist to understand that people are anxious because of October 7th. And one of the reasons that contributed greatly to their anxiety is the fact that official Israel didn't really function post October 7th. And I think that made it even more important for people to pitch in and to give and to be part of this, desire to fix things.
Yeah, so here's my take on this. I think it's very disturbing and infuriating that the government response is incapable to meet the scale of the atrocities and the needs, the magnitude of the crisis. And I think we have to admit there are many reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that there have been budget costs to social services for the last 2 decades at least, and we see the mental health services and the welfare services in needs of billions of shekels in normal days. And whatever doesn't work, the system that doesn't work well in normal days will never work well in emergencies. And so philanthropy in the nonprofit sector was the first to respond and is still the first to hand out assistance. But it is very dangerous because we cannot let philanthropy lead the social services in Israel. They cannot carry the bulk of social services, of the delivery of social services on their shoulders. It has to be only contemporary, right, or supplementary to what the government should be doing. It's important to say, though, we have, in some cases, very well equipped and well trained government officials who are doing their best to serve the immediate needs of evacuees and the injured, right? And we have a great health system that is giving medical treatment, and we have the National Security Institute is paying, for some of the essential needs of the evacuees. But the system is rot. So these great officials, government officials, can't mobilize funding. They can't be innovative about mobilizing funding. They can't show flexibility. Their hands are tied behind their backs because the system is dry.
And the question is one of effectiveness. And I know that many of our listeners and our viewers are friends of the university, and probably many of them do actively participate in this wave of this charitable wave that you're describing, which is really unprecedented. Perhaps only 1948 was, triggered such a massive, outpouring of support, financial support, and otherwise, including volunteers. Um, do we have any way to look at the effectiveness of those donations through your research?
Well, assessing effectiveness is always long term, right? Needs long term research. We see the immediate effects, right, of the charitable giving and the spontaneous volunteering and the nonprofit work supporting, the Nova Party survivors, right, for example. So we see that the effects are immediate, but how effective it will be in the long term, containing the post trauma or delaying the post-trauma. We need time, right, to research the effectiveness of giving. But I think it's safe to say that the well-established nonprofits in Israel, the ones that have a lot of experience and expertise, are effective at their work. We have a lot in the past to show for that. And it's good to keep on supporting these organizations because we can trust that they will do their best to develop, new models and systems to address the needs in Israel today.
Now, for our audience that is interested in following your research going forward, tell us a little bit about the methodology and where can they find the findings and keep themselves up to date.
So first of all, it's important to say that all of the reports are published on our website, the Institute for Law and Philanthropy at the Buchman Faculty of Law. You can find the reports on the surveys that we're doing to collect data on the trends and patterns of giving, and also all the briefs, both in English and in Hebrew, about the different topics that I mentioned, the different social causes and the different developing needs, of the educational system and the Arabs and Jews in Israel, and even vocational training in light of in the shadow of this crisis, which is also an economic crisis. And we will keep on posting these on our website. At some point, these reports will delve back into the data to perform deeper research, like academic research, right? But we're not there yet. We're so engaged. I mean, we ourselves are so engaged in the need to support the philanthropic sector right now that we put aside the academic research and we're shedding light on what's going on.
And I should add that we're going to add the link to your website with the study, both to our video and to our audio files here. Um, anything that you can tell us about? We know that coordination is a big thing when you have so many groups out there trying to do the right thing. What have we learned about the level of organization in that again new wave of charitable giving?
So I think it's important to note that the civil society, the sector of civil society, should keep on being spontaneous and lean and frenzy and innovative because that's how we want to reach out to all these untapped needs, right? And untapped resources as well. But then on the other hand, with the more organized and strategic philanthropy and the more organized and strategic nonprofits are well organized and communicate between themselves. So we have infrastructure organizations, both for the nonprofit sector and the philanthropic sector, that gather all these organizations that develop tools and means to approach um, mental or emotional needs, or educational needs, or after-school educational needs, or welfare needs, or vocational training needs, and they connect, right, and learn from each other. There's always more to do on the front of collaboration. But then the Jewish Funders Network as a network of funders, and the Forum of Foundations as a network for foundations, and the Institute for Law and Philanthropy, which we consider an infrastructure organization as well. The fact that we do these briefings, we assemble both foundation leaders and private donors for these briefings, is also a way to get them to collaborate. So we see groups of funders collaborating around the planning of the development to address the mental and emotional needs or the educational needs in the next 5 years.
Now, I'm assuming you're also inviting representatives of the authorities to those
Yep.
discussions. So, for example, there's a big question of we now have a crisis in Israel of hundreds. I don't know the exact number. People say 200,000. Some people say 350,000 displaced Israelis, people that left their homes in the south because they were destroyed, and people that left their homes in the north because they were threatened. And so the question is, obviously, this would require a coordinated effort of both the philanthropic world and the government. How do you see that happening in years to come? Because this is a big project. This will take years to rehabilitate those communities.
That's a very, very good question. Thank you for posing this. Um, so the first thing to note is that even the government doesn't have a good data system to follow up on where people were evacuated to, and if they stayed there or not, if they come and go. I mean, people are free to go. And imagine yourself living with in one bedroom with with three of your children for over a month when you're traumatized. That's not a good setting. People need to go. So, so to begin with, the infrastructure of data for the government is really missing. So that's why you don't know and people don't know how many evacuees or self-evacuees and where they are, right? That's to begin with. A lot of effort is going to follow up on where people are and what their needs are. The local authorities are really helpful on that. Local authorities that the evacuees are staying with, if it's Jerusalem or Netanya or Eilat, right? They're giving their support and their services. So, so the collaboration that we're foreseeing is among, philanthropy, the civil society and nonprofit sector, the local authorities, and the government, right? It's a long way to get there because the government doesn't really collaborate among itself too well. That's why it needs the Tkuma authority outside of the ministries, right? It's not a ministerial authority, it's outside the ministry. And there are great people in Tkuma, but they also need to learn what's going on. They need to be on our briefs, right? To learn what's going on. And at some point, all these authorities will have to work together to realize how best to invest, not only to repair, but to eventually grow out of this catastrophe, out of this crisis, to have better social justice, better inclusive economy. This is the goal, right?
Yeah.
This is always the goal during a routine and during crisis.
Listen, we can talk about this for a long time, but unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world. And I just wanted to end this wonderful conversation with you with a question. I have a friend who actually studied right here in this building, but got his PhD from Princeton. Who, during COVID, I had a conversation with him, and he told me the best way to look at COVID is to think of COVID as the dress rehearsal for the big thing, for the real thing. Meaning, every crisis should be viewed as the dress rehearsal for the bigger crisis that will come. Question, as someone who's been in the system for many years, have we learned anything from COVID? Have we used the lessons from COVID during this crisis that erupted post October 7th?
I think we have, at least the civil society and philanthropic sector has learned a lot and have used the platforms that were developed through the COVID crisis to go back, and assemble all these people for briefs and the search for needs and the way to address these needs. These are things that we are more prepared. We came in more prepared due to the developments we developed through COVID, right? There's still a lot more to do on the government side.
Yes, believe me, I spent 25 years in government. I know that. I know that. I always tell my students that if they consider two options regarding government behavior, malice or ineptitude, at least when it comes to the Israeli government, I tell them always choose ineptitude first before you accuse them of being malicious. But I couldn't thank you enough.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for all the work that you've done
Thank you.
on behalf of our society.
I just want to end this
Please.
conversation, please, with the hope and the demand, right, of the return of the hostages and of our soldiers, our brave soldiers, and the end of this war, and to demand our leaders, both Palestinian and the Israeli leaders, to choose a path of peace.
And accountability.
Mm.
I think that we need them to be more accountable throughout the entire Western world, not just here.
We need a change of perception.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We,
Well,
we need to
I thank you for educating us
Thank you.
and
Thank you for
inspiring
inviting me.
us. And hopefully, we'll get to host you here in our podcast again. And from Tel Aviv to our viewers and listeners back home, until our next episode, goodbye from Tel Aviv.
This is Tao Unbound, the English language podcast of Tel Aviv University. Please welcome your host, Ido Aharoni, Tel Aviv University's graduate, member of the Board of Governors, lecturer, writer, and veteran diplomat.